welcome to the African segment of the People's Food Summit 2023. It's been my absolute privilege to be a part of this incredible movement for 3 years now. This is the third time in a row. So, Lamgelegile Gu African segment, we welcome you to the African segment. We're going to be really enjoying stories from different speakers. Our theme this year for Africa is to build connections from landscape level to household level of the story of food and agriculture, especially in the sectors of regeneration or regenerative agriculture, agroecology, permaculture, as well as bringing in cultural dynamics to how everything works together and how important it is for us to keep the important pieces connected. At the same time, our speakers are also going to share about some of the challenges and the difficulties that they face in this work. This work doesn't go without challenges, but I think the most exciting thing is that there is too much hope for us to give up or too much hope for us to focus on the negative. So let's dive in together as we build a movement for regenerative, organic, and agroecological food and farming. Regeneration International is a network of networks launched in 2015, and I'm sure you've heard a little bit about it, or some of you already know about it. And in 2017, gained a nonprofit status, which is called 501c3 in the USA terms. But I think across the world that applies as nonprofit. And I am privileged to be a part of this team as the African coordinator. And so we have our different coordinators from across the world that will be sharing and bringing together into this platform different speakers. So we may have different contexts, which is the beautiful part about having a People's Food Summit that will be contextually relevant for the group of people that are presenting and sharing this story to the world. Though I'm likely to say that I think this problem that we are facing here in the pictures that are in front of us is basically probably a threat to all humanity across the world, which is biodiversity loss that is expressed in diminishing, desertifying landscapes that are losing water, losing plant life, losing animal life. And it's really also seen in how farmers are being taught to farm in industrious ways, monocultures without cover and diversity, leaving farmers really vulnerable. And this vulnerability goes beyond just food insecurity, but social insecurities, unending conflicts. When we get into the issues of climate change, which I'm not an expert in, but I live in environments that are in the front lines, you see weather extremes every year has so much insecurity and uncertainty whether we will harvest or not. So I think this year our focus was to look at that broader picture and also bring in stories of what solutions are being implemented on the continent. So we are part of networks that are working here in Africa, and I, as Precious, I work with communal farmers, and we have this statement that we said, and we put it on our t-shirts, and it says regenerative actions for a future we all want. Because at the end of the day, whether we agree politically, religiously, or in our social norms and gatherings, one thing that is common is we all want security, we all want to thrive. We all desire abundance. So basically, humanity wants one thing, the same thing, that is to be secure, to abound in a healthy and secure environment. So yeah, there you go. There is that statement on a t-shirt that we love so much on this end. And as Regeneration International, we participate in the networks in our different regions. So in Africa, we are part of Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, which is an Africa-wide network where we do discussions and plug into policy spaces, including UN negotiations in the climate COP, for bringing in agroecology and all solutions that we feel will take us forward in terms of building back our biodiversity and agroecology in the spaces of policymaking. And then we also participate in recent times, I've participated in the Healthy Soil and Healthy Food Initiative, where we produced a book of stories, and including the work that we do here on the ground. And that was my absolute privilege to also represent our network and be part of the authors of that book and part of the presenters. And then we also work at communal level in partnership with Regeneration International. We celebrate milestones for regenerative farmers, as well as seed fairs and field fairs. So I think my story here is to take you through a little bit of the bigger picture, but also share a little bit of the work that I do myself. Okay, so AFSA, which is Alliance for Food Sovereignty, they run a campaign through the Seed and Knowledge Initiative and AFSA themselves across the African region. It's called My Food is African. So our food is our life, our seed are our future as well. So just a sharing that we are part of these campaigns as well. And it's been incredible to bring this same knowledge and same energy to communal spaces so that we start appreciating our food as we evolved in our cultures. So if we look at the bigger picture, biodiversity loss is bigger than just cropping and food farming. So here, I'm an educator in holistic management, or a facilitator of holistic management, working with communal farmers. And when I say communal farmers, it's about 70% of the countries in the continent actually are smallholder farmers in the agricultural sector. So these are very important people, and they are custodians of vast landscapes. So there are different tools at the disposal in different regions. But for us here, one tool that we've engaged is the tool of holistic plant grazing, using livestock to bring back the health of habitats, the health of watersheds, and bringing back rivers, streams, and springs back to life. And as such, all the food that animals use, or the grass that animals forage on, is brought back to crop fields, which is where farmers grow their food, and then eventually ends up in the plate as food, or in the granary as seed. So without landscape level management and good decisions about how to bring back biodiversity, there is no food sovereignty and no food security. So reliable food systems will definitely have to start with healthy soils. And I'm sure these pictures are just communicating with you, sharing how sandy and very hard soils to crop on are being turned around into fertile and healthy soils. So building soil health is really important for food sovereignty and seed sovereignty and the future of healthy communities. And here's another picture again of a landscape that has been changed, a soil that has been changed into soil health and ready for cropping. And when we farm, we encourage crop diversity, mixed cropping for resiliency in the field, and also resiliency for the farmer. If, because of the weather extremes and the unreliability of rainfall patterns, for example, one crop may fail and one crop will succeed and give the farmer enough food or something that they can trade to then get the grains that they need to feed their family. And in the end, honestly, our desire is to see a harvest that is a bumper harvest, is that picture that you can see there of a harvest of millet. And then the culture of seed preservation cuts across from household to communal spaces. So we are encouraging communities to really continuously share knowledge and information on how to select seed from the field before you harvest and put your food. The seed is what you must preserve first, and where to store the seed, how to store it. And in that process, also encourage abundance mindset. If your neighbor doesn't have a certain type of seed, you have a platform to share through seed fairs. And this seed, the food, the cow dung from the broader landscape management ends up in a plate. We are bringing back into our local communities the art, the beauty, and the excitement of cooking our own local food for our visitors. And so these are some of the cuisines from my communities that I work with in Ndlovu. The food is really good. And I thought this was such an appropriate picture. And here's another one for when we visited Ethiopia with our friends at AFSA in 2022. A lavish of amazing, tasty, traditionally prepared meals by incredible women and men of the communities of Ethiopia. And in the process of growing food from the landscape, you bring in people. People are at the center of this because we are the ones who will bring solutions to reversing biodiversity loss, bringing back the integrity of food and seed, and sharing and celebrating the notion of feeding ourselves, especially in communities where food aid is the order of the day. And I'll read a little bit of a statement from my friend. Her name is Candida. She is based in Portugal. She once sent me this statement sometime last year. She said, if we want to do something differently, let's invite those that have never done it our way, like the younger generations or those from other cultures. If we don't support war, then let's stop fighting and picking our opponents, but rather activate the solutions anyway. So I hope that in the midst of our stories from our different speakers, you will also just pick the vibe that says, let's activate solutions anyway. We are driving the future of food and biodiversity, and let's keep our spirit alive. And so here's to regeneration and happy World Food Day.
Ethlo was formed in 2007 and it transitioned in 2015 from working only in Venda, South Africa, to scale up to Mpumalanga province and the Bigeda district in southeastern Zimbabwe. Ethlos accompanies traditional communities to revive their indigenous ecological knowledge and governance systems, their seed, traditional food, medicine, and knowledge of all nature of plants and creatures in the wider landscape. The elders share the knowledge embedded in their traditions and in the soil that give life to their ancestors and continue to give life to us. Our work accompanies communities in reconnecting with their soil, their seed, and their culture. This work is exemplified in the annual celebration of Seed and Food Fair in both South Africa and Zimbabwe. The story of the Seed Fair tells the story of Ethlo. Ethlo's journey started with few seed on display at a community dialogue and has evolved over time to plenty, representing the process of bringing back, sharing, and multiplying seed. As different seed and varieties are identified and propagated, the seed and food fairs and exchange visits encourages farmers to share seed that has been lost, thereby expanding the spaces where we see these seeds.
The community dialogue methodology, adopted from the Gaia Foundation's work in the Colombian Amazon, allows the community to remember how, where, when, and by whom traditional practices, ceremonies, and rituals were performed. This is the way it used to be in African communities, where the elders, custodians, and spiritual leaders sat together to reconnect with ancient ancestors of the place. The custodians understood how seed, which is at the center of governing traditional practices in many cultures, is a holistic element. Seed is more than food. It affirms the good relationship between soil, seed, other life forms, and cultural practices. Ceremonies and rituals helped maintain order and balance. Slowly, as communities rediscover their traditions through community dialogues and the reintroduction of lost seed, they discuss how to share the seeds and what important rituals associated with the seed need to be performed. They value their indigenous knowledge that reconnects them with nature. They start reading and remembering forgotten signs on the mountains and in the forests that connects with what is happening in the fields where farming activities are taking place. They begin to recognize when and what work needs to be done, when it is time to prepare the land to receive the seed, when to gather as a community to ask for rain and the blessings of the ancestors for the next planting season, and when is the right time to harvest and to hold rituals to say thank you for the abundant food gathered from the fields and beyond. Communities are remembering the relevance of wild fruit, foods, and medicinal plants, and using all efforts to bring back the rich diversity of the land again. They are working together to plant and protect the wider landscape by reviving traditional practices that govern the harvesting of wild plants. This includes farmers being guided by nature to show respect.
In Bikita, the seed has reignited communal labor, called by several Shona names, Jangano, Jagwa, and Numwe, depending on what work is being done. Coming together to share the work makes the cohesion within the community more alive, as farmers participate collectively in harvesting, threshing, winnowing, and grinding the millet. There is the revival of songs, of making specially designed baskets and constructing unique structures for the safe storage of these small grains after being harvested. Some communities have revived the rain ritual, bringing back the prominence of sacred seeds like finger millet that were disappearing from the communities. The power of the chants and prayers from the desperate communities echoes from the dry valleys, climbs the hills, crosses over streams, and eventually forms the essence that results in the blessing of rain. And the sacred mountains regain their potency as communities celebrate together. The strengthening of traditional farming governance systems contributes to improved soils and landscapes for the benefit of future generations. Various traditional practices, combined with activities learned from the agroecology training sessions, like making biofertilizers, are bringing back soil fertility. Communities are also coming together to dig contours and water storage pits to prevent soil erosion and protect their fields from runoff during the extreme floods that are becoming a regular occurrence. The harvested water is used to irrigate their crops during periods of drought.
In Mpumalanga and Venda, farmers are committed to increasing and multiplying the diversity of local seed and reviving ceremonies. Elders, as holders of community knowledge, are leading the revival of different rituals for honoring the seed and the crops that are harvested, like biting or first fruits ritual. They let nature and the ancestors eat first, and then the whole community is free to eat the crops after the celebration. During the COVID lockdowns, youth attended the dialogues and agroecology training sessions, and through the sharing of intergenerational knowledge, they discovered that they had an interest in their isiSwati culture and in farming as a way of generating income to earn a living. Earthlaw works with a diversity of cultures and is being appreciated for reviving the cultures of these different communities in Southern Africa that builds confidence and connection. The practice and uptake of the work differ from community to community, but common to all community we work with is culture, indigenous knowledge, the selecting, storing, and sharing of seed, rituals and ceremonies, and working together. Many communities approach Earth Law to work with them when they see the results in their neighboring communities. Our work is growing organically as more and more farmers attend our seed fair celebration, exchange visits, dialogues, agroecology training sessions, rituals, and ceremonies. We are grateful to know that our work helps to safeguard the community we work with against hunger during droughts and storms and builds resilience to deal with emerging challenges like the war in Ukraine and the pandemic like COVID. Earth Law's accompaniment of communities on a journey to remember and revive each tradition in its season and in its own context is a lifelong journey that cannot be reached in one step. Together we create a future we want for our children and all of nature.
Okay, welcome everyone. Still going on with our World Food Day. This is People's Food Summit for 2023. I'm here with my awesome colleagues and friends and movers and shakers in this part of my world. Juliet and Chifundo. Juliet, who's based in Zambia, and Chifundo, who's based in Malawi. So I think I'll take the honors to just share a little bit about these two wonderful women that I'm looking at, whom I also hope to indulge you in as they share their story. So we're going to basically be just chatting back and forth to bring out also the story of our continent. So Juliet is an ecofeminist and agronomist from Zambia. She's well studied in this area of agroecology, as well as working with communities. She has qualifications from the University of Zambia and a university that I'm not sure I can pronounce the name. She'll do it when she does. It must be in Holland. Is that right, Juliet? And I think she will shake her head at some point. She has 11 years of experience working on supporting and advocating for indigenous seed and knowledge and farmer managed seed systems that are central for food and nutrition security and climate adaptation and mitigation in this continent. She's also a qualified trainer for farmer field school approaches in participatory plant breeding, including local food systems and nutrition and farmer seed enterprises. So Juliet is going to share today massively on how to build movements. She works with an organization in Zambia called Community Technology Development Trust, CTDT, in the beautiful country of Zambia, which is basically my neighbor here in Zimbabwe. Juliet, I'll hand over to you to just say hi so that people can just see your face.
Hi, everyone. I hope you'll be getting me very clearly. I'm joining you from Zambia, and I'm very, very excited to be part of this discussion with my two beautiful queens who are holding part of half of the sky and doing amazing work.
Thanks, Juliet. And then I have Chifundo Kokwa. Chifundo is basically my country lady who is also Malawian. She is based in Malawi currently and has worked for over 14 years in permaculture and land designs. Her work really revolves around supporting school communities and communal settlements to achieve healthy, productive landscapes through low input and high impact techniques in agroecology. She has great skills in capacity building for many local organizations to facilitate sustainable land use in communities through schools. So, you know, there's a saying, catch them young. I think she's one of our warriors in catching them young. She has promoted the use of what we call integrated land use design, or ILUD process, as a tool for schools and college communities to develop multifunctional landscapes. Chifundo, again, just say hi. I know your face was on the screen for a while.
Hi, everyone. Looking forward to interacting more with you today. Thank you, Precious, for that awesome introduction. And looking forward to chatting with you and Juliet in this session.
Thank you. I think for now, you ladies can go ahead and introduce yourselves. Tell us how your journey began, what inspired you to get into this journey, because your session today is basically how to build a movement, and Juliet is at a broader communal level. Chifundo is mostly through schools, but also in communities. So it will be a mix. So I think I'm going to give each one of you maybe about between 5 to 10 minutes to share, even in pictorial form. Then we'll have a beautiful chat and dialogue after. So Juliet, feel free to start. And I think you have sharing rights.
My name is Juliet. I live in Zambia, and I work with an organization that's called Community Technology Development Trust. How did my journey start? To start with, I had never imagined that there could be such amazing work that people would be doing or I would get involved in. I went to university to study agricultural sciences. I did agricultural crop sciences, and I was trained in industrial agriculture. The agriculture that everyone knows, I think everyone who's in university is trained on this type of system. When I got out of university, my first bet for employment was the military. Can you imagine? Can you imagine me being in military and working in the military? Yes, I did that. That failed. And then I stumbled upon an advert with CTDT. That was in 2012, around October. I applied and I got the position. I started as a project officer. When I started work, everything else did not make sense at all. I was in the middle of continuing to work or quitting because I did not understand anything about farmer-managed seed systems or rural seed systems or agroecology, organic production, because I had really very little idea on those topics. So beginning for me was very, very hard. But what really drove me was that I saw a need of this work being done because I was interacting with real people and addressing real issues that communities were facing then. And in 2012, I think the aspect of climate change and dominance of corporates of seed systems was not very. I think it was not very, very visible as we see it now. So in the later years, things became very challenging and we could see all these changes happening in the communities. I saw how dreadful droughts could really be on communities, especially for the women and children. And for me, really, the work has been connecting with people, the heart, connecting with people, the mind, and connecting with people through the stomach. And if you're going to engage in movement building, you must really consider really having strong connections with people's hearts, with people's minds, and with people's stomachs. People need to eat, people need to be provoked to think, and people need to develop a drive or a passion for what they're doing. And also just the whole broad concept that agroecology is really embedded in nature and gives us the connection to nature really, really got me inspired to do this work. I think studying conventional agriculture really did separate me a lot from nature. I think going back to connect so much with nature just gave me the inspiration to do this work that we're doing now. I think I'll talk a little bit about CTDT. I want to share slides just to show some of the work that we do. Okay, yeah, so I think Community Technology Development Trust, the organization I work with, is really centered on supporting farmer-managed seed systems. So we are all in the broad spectrum of conserving, sustainable conservation and utilization of agrobiodiversity to contribute to food and nutrition security of the marginal communities that we work in. So the work that we do is centered a lot around research, community seed banking, capacity building, and then a lot around community mobilization and connecting the communities and building that movement. So for capacity building, really, we do a lot of training in terms of seed analysis, where we see what kind of diversity is within the community, but we also multiply and increase these varieties, local varieties that we work with. So for us, in the broad spectrum of agroecology, we are focusing on building sustainable and resilient seed system. Our focus mainly has been on women and youth empowerment, because when we're in the communities, we see that the inequality that is within the seed system framework impacts mostly the youth and the women. So the knowledge building, the learning together, and sometimes it's not nice to say capacity building. I think learning together, because farmers ourselves are all learning and creating knowledge and generating this knowledge. We also work a lot around community seed banks. We have constructed 4 community seed banks. This is just to ensure that we are saving the germplasm that is within the communities. Farmers are also utilizing this, community germplasm that is in the community seed banks so that they can improve their livelihoods, build their resilience, and improve on nutrition and also the economic aspect of it. I also said we work around research, so we do a lot of participatory plant breeding to improve the seed systems, the farm management system. So we research, we improve the already available diversity within the community, and then we also select good varieties that are well adapted to, that are very contextual to those communities, and the communities are taking the lead in doing this research. So we are also developing varieties with the communities to just make sure that they are getting varieties that are very contextual and fit their agroecological environments in which these communities exist in. Also, while we do this work, we want a lot of people to be part of this movement that we're building through research, through seed bank work, and through co-creation of knowledge. So we do a lot of field days, seed fairs, community radio programs, community sensitization, and mobilization, and participate a lot around national events to ensure that we are also influencing policy. I think this is a little bit I can say, and I'll stop here.
Thank you, Juliet. So beautiful, and obviously the broad spectrum that you guys are covering, from movement building to research. The research and development also helps you share the story of this work that you're doing, and it is probably best told by the farmers themselves because they've done all the research. And I'm really excited about your ability to serve, especially the seeds that are local. As you were talking about it, I was thinking it's probably more than just serving the germplasm, but also the culture of how these are preserved and the story of seeds from generations. But there's lots of interesting things that we'll dive in on as we progress. I'm so grateful for your sharing and your generosity in this instance. So I'll say, Chifundo, you're next. And Chifundo, you can also share what your name means, if that's okay.
Thank you, Precious. A lovely introduction there, Juliet. Enjoyed listening to you. I've known you for a bit, but that was, I got surprised by some new knowledge. Very nice. So my name is Chifundo, which means mercy in Chichewa. Yeah, and I am from Lilongwe, Malawi. I grew up in Zimbabwe. So Precious and I shared a country at some point. Yeah, and so I work with an organization called Schools and Colleges Permaculture Malawi, Scope Malawi in short. And my journey to get here, very similar to Juliet's at the beginning. I also studied conventional agriculture at college, but rather than Juliet, I was more animal science than crops. But then I grew up in a small farming town. So growing up in a small farming town in Zimbabwe, surrounded by lots of white farmers, I was just curious about agriculture. They used to come into town every month end, to shop before they went back to their farms. So I always thought, this must be cool. They'd come in, look like they had lots of money, do a lot of shopping, fuel their trucks and cars, and then drive off every month end. And, so I was always intrigued. So yeah, I got into agriculture. And then when I was at school, yeah, I did attachments at big commercial farms where we would drive tractors, even small me would be interning and had a big tractor to drive across a 400-hectare farm. It was fun, but then I quickly realized that kind of farming really needed big money, and that my little old father or mother or myself, you know, just couldn't achieve that much wealth or didn't have that much capital to invest. So I think I started questioning the system even then. And then I moved to Malawi. And then when I moved to Malawi, I got introduced to permaculture, like right off the bat. And immediately when I had my first permaculture training, so the normal course for a permaculture person is you do a 12-day, 72-hour permaculture design course. So I did that. And right from day one, I went into this permaculture design course unprepared. I was told it was 12 days, but I had another job and I thought, oh, I'm not going to stay for the whole 12 days. And so I went in with a pair of jeans that was on my body and a t-shirt. And I stayed there for the whole 12 days with just a pair of jeans and a t-shirt. That's how transformed I was. I just immediately thought, this works. Because my father had a small garden in our backyard where he threw everything, and everything just grew like weeds, and it was green and it was beautiful. And my father had these funny recipes that he used to make every day, you know, for breakfast. He made the best breakfasts, but uncoordinated. You'd take amaranthus there and that. So I kind of think I had that in me, but now when I heard there is this kind of farming, which is similar to what my father had in his backyard, I was like, oh, this is so cool. So long story short, I was hooked. So I've been doing permaculture ever since. Eventually ended up getting a job in the permaculture arena, and I've been working with Scope since 2012. So maybe I'll go a little bit also into the work of Scope. So basically, Scope Malawi works with schools and colleges, like I said. So we are a permaculture program. I won't really go into a lot of detail explaining what permaculture is. It will take me a full year to talk about what permaculture is and what it is not. So what we do is we do agroecology and permaculture, and we work with youth and schools. And so far, our work, we have trained around 52 schools across Malawi in 12 districts. Basically the work, when we get into a community, we train the whole school community. And when we say community, we're talking about the teachers that we train. We're talking about the communities, which is the parents of the learners that go to the school. And we also look at the school leadership structures. That is the PTA. In Malawi, we have a structure also called the School Management Committee. We work with those ones as well. We work with the local traditional leaders, which is the chiefs, because we want to achieve ultimate transformation. And ultimate transformation starts with everyone. Once everyone is on board, then we can work together. So yeah, our main focus at school is to establish permaculture clubs, you know, these extracurricular clubs that we have at school. So we want to have every school in Malawi having a permaculture club. And that club will be the start of forming what we call eco-warriors, kids or children that can speak about climate change, that can speak about the issues that they are facing, children that are well aware of the issues that we are facing. So a movement, essentially, but a movement of young people. Yeah. So I'm just going to show a picture of everyone in the school community working together. So we have the school leaders, which is PTA. We have parents there. We also have the young ones there. They're all involved in how they design their school. They're all involved in how they want their school to look like, because the school is essentially for the community. So the design happens for the community, by the community. So that's just showing how we design on the ground with the model of the school on the ground and making decisions there. And ultimately, this is what we hope to achieve. diverse household gardens. So for all of the children's homes, or all of the permaculture club members' homes, and all of the parents' homes, we want to have diverse household gardens that look like that have tons of nutrition per square meter, you know. So this is what we want. We want to have dense nutrition. And we also want to transform the school grounds. Ultimately, this is our aim. From bare to productive. And productive, we want the children to access food and fruit around the school. So I just have 2 examples of 2 schools that have totally transformed. And you can see the difference over the years that we've worked with them. Yeah, so these are the 2 schools. And lastly, over the last few years, because we work with different needs in the community, we've also realized that the community is now producing stuff. So we also want to add value. This is of particular interest to youth as well. So we also talk a lot about value addition. How do we create money? You know, young people don't just want to talk stuff and not talk about money. At the end of the day, they want to know that economically they're getting supported. So we form youth groups where they can actually add value and get a little bit of money from the permaculture produce. So in brief, I think that's me, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chifundo. What a beautiful sharing as well, including, honestly, you are seriously the base of this work that we are in. As we meet the people who grew up in schools that you probably impacted, they are the adults, right, of the communities that will then be agroecological. So that's really amazing. And I kept wondering, why do I relate so much with these 2 women? I see one was in the army. Beautiful surprises. One was obviously in the army, and she's a soldier in the moment because of the work continues, right? A luta continua, except in the agroecology sphere. And then, well, Chifundo drove tractors and she spent 12 days with 1 pair of jeans and 1 t-shirt. Like, it doesn't get tougher than that. And it's so powerful to see that we all sort of came from a conventional background. I, on the other hand, studied integrated environmental management. It's all industrious. That's the base. One did animal science, one did plant breeding, agricultural sciences. So it's we were sort of influenced by that. And we always say there's no actual plan that we were exposed to say, hey, I'll do agroecology, regeneration, and permaculture. But we sort of stumbled into these journeys and they immediately made sense. So that's really powerful. So maybe a question to both of you ladies, to say, you know, most of the times, even in regenerative agriculture, I face challenges where everyone thinks it's just limited to practices. And I think that's the same with agroecology or permaculture. I don't know what these terms mean to you over and above the eventual practice that people end up implementing. What do they mean to you when you communicate to communities? I know we use our local languages as well. So it's so nice to just hear your thoughts.
Pondo, I think you can go first. I took the first round.
Okay, Juliet. So for me, it's more than just a practice. It's a way of life. So you look at your life socially, ecologically, economically, and culturally. And agroecology or permaculture just fits right in, you know. It's about socially, how do you connect with people? How do you connect with everyone around you? You look at you know, there's social practices that you practice when you do agroecology, how you work together as a community, especially when you do seed work. The harvests, you harvest as a group, you are upholding social norms and working together. In my work, especially when you look at intergenerational learning, from old to young, you know, and from even young to old. In our work, we do a lot where even the younger people are teaching the older souls, you know, technology. No, this is how you get a GPS coordinate, and this is how you do this. So it's about a way of life, like socially, economically. I talked about how we try to add value to the things that these people produce, the produce that they produce. It's about creating or looking at the whole value chain as well. Ecologically, I think ecologically, everyone knows it's agroecology. So everyone tends to focus on the ecology part of it, but it's also very cultural. There are cultural aspects in it. The seed practices. I think I heard Method will come on and he will talk about the cultural practices that are involved in preserving of seed, in preserving of the work. So it's a way of life, really. There are so many things, that day-to-day things that are just more than just one practice, but it's an all-encompassing way of life.
Thanks, Chifundo. When you started, you did talk about, you know, when you saw the white farmers during our days, and, you know, they would look like they have it all together, but there's a lot that went in. And when you get exposed to the farmlands of conventional agriculture, you see the bill that these farmers are faced with. And you know that an ordinary communal farmer will not be able to pull this off. And so I really like the angle of it is a way of life and the basis of ecology, economic, social, and cultural, everything being brought together into this big pot. And I think that's where, honestly, we tend to, when Juliet, I'm not sure if you want to add onto Chifundo's definitions, because I think you also have another eye and perspective. Do you?
Yeah, I think Chifundo has said everything, but for me also, really what these terms really mean to us or to me when we are in the community and discussing, it's really about inclusivity. It's really about equity, and really looking at the systems that work for everyone, no matter at what level you are, and the systems that can sustain. Not only sustaining, I think agroecology or regenerative farming does not only want to look after people or the people that are engaged, involved, but it wants really looking at how do we as a planet as a whole, because we are only a small fragment of a planet. We are not everything that is there in the universe. And our task really has been to nurture, you know, to care for and to, you know, connect and give love to the earth that feeds us, provide for us. And I think aspects of agroecology and regenerative systems are all holistic or encompassing and looking after everyone. Because remember, everything in the world has a cautious, the soil that we're using, you know, the water that we're using, you know, the plants that feed us, they also have their own wisdom, their own knowledge, their own cautious. But then how do we make sure that this all-knowing universe is, you know, treated in a way that it will continue sustaining us? I think for me, that's what comes to mind.
Thanks, Juliet. Such a powerful message, especially in the critical times that we're in. I remember when we chatted yesterday with both of you, that I think the more we continue to just, you know, close our eyes and focus on ourselves, the more we dig ourselves deeper into the troubles that we're already facing. So you guys, can you share with me some of the, you know, some of the challenges that you're facing with communities that you're working with at the moment? I think, Juliet, you shared something on, you know, when you started around 2010, this work, there wasn't much corporate involvement or controls of how communities keep seeds and how they share and how they do the continuity. But then the storm has been looming and getting worse and worse. And I am very grateful because we also have like really strong networks in the continent who are, are rising, but the storm is stronger and stronger, and people have stayed in this knowledge that opposes growth. I wanted to see if those kind of challenges are impacting your everyday work in your landscapes.
I think the challenges are always going to be present in the work, except that people that have been to the military maybe have to win one day, and we're very hopeful that we'll grow a stronger movement that will overcome some of these challenges that we see. I think really the biggest challenge I saw in the beginning was the undermining of what people already knew, undermining of knowledge that already existed in those communities, already existed within people that were practicing all these practices that we're talking about. I think that really posed a challenge, because if your knowledge is being undermined and devalued, there's no way you can move it forward. I think a lot of our efforts and a lot of our work really has been to ensure that this knowledge is well accepted and we are acknowledged as co-creators of knowledge, and not only being at the receiving end of knowledge. I think this is where we found that for me, I believe that everything else that we have been doing or are doing has already existed in our communities. But it's because of this devaluing of another way, a different way of knowing, that we see that we have all these issues being present. So for me, that was the biggest challenge, and I think we are making strides in bringing the light and showing the beauty of this way of knowing and this way of doing things, this other knowledge that we have in terms of agroecology and the regenerative practices. Then we have our big guys, the people that want to go to shop every month, like Shifundo was saying, wanting to have a dominant control. So things are pushed every day onto the communities, things that communities don't even understand, and they have to adopt them, because then we see also that our governance system, our structures in which these things are pushed through the governance system, is also accepting and not questioning what are the impacts of doing this on our communities. So for me, I think it's really the issues around undermining of knowledge, and also how policy is being framed.
Thank you. Undermining of knowledge. Honestly, the undermining of knowledge, including food systems in our communities, has seen us have our communities throw away all the foods that they evolved with, and embracing new cultures of food, which comes with its own problems on what people then grow. And it's so powerful what you shared. I think in our work, we design really for resiliency. So I think some of our program designs are made in a way that it creates space for emerging issues, right? I like how you said, once you're in the army, your idea is that one day you will win. So I guess everyone who's in this movement is also crafted for really keeping eyes on the prize in the end, which the prize may not be anything but a community that is able to stand on their own. So I really honor that statement, Juliet. Chifundo, do you have any additions on some of the emerging issues that you see working against the beautiful work that you're doing with schools?
It's very similar actually to what Juliet said. I found that very interesting, that we're facing very similar issues in Zambia and Malawi, maybe probably across the continent. Earlier this afternoon, I was actually talking to a news reporter who was telling me, because I was at a seed fair, and they were telling me that, you know, they call it new technologies. Why are we against new technologies? And there's a word that we use in Malawi where we're talking about old versus new. And it's this idea that farming is old, that agroecology is an old system of farming, and that it's not, if I can say this, it's not sexy for the youth, it's not enticing enough for the youth, So we have to make it enticing enough for the youth. And that's really so sad, because as a continent, we have to always defend our foods, our way of life. It's this defending of the knowledge that Juliet was talking about. And so I was telling him, we don't use those words in permaculture. We don't say this is old, because to us, this is young, this is fresh, this is sexy. And, why do we have to sit here and say this is old, as opposed to something that comes from the West, or something that comes from somewhere else, from Asia? That's better. So just because it comes from somewhere else does not mean it is way more superior to what we are doing here. So yeah, those are similar problems, I think, that we're facing across the continent. And I think also we need to, when we start looking at that, I don't want to speak like a revolutionary kind of person, but then it's also re-looking at our own economic systems as well, because it also feeds into that. The way, if we see our own resources as being inferior, then we're also going to see our own products that we make as inferior, and they will not make it anywhere onto the global scale. They will be valued way less. And yet we are providing, as a continent, the bulk of the resources to the rest of the world.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Maybe to just add on.
Go.
Maybe to just add on, Chifundos, I think, sorry for the both of you, something has just passed through my mind. I think also when we think about not revolution, but now for me, evolution, how the world is evolving. I think sometimes we are not, as ourselves and the communities, we're evolving at our own time, and our evolution is being sped up because people feel like that we need to catch up with something that is new. We are being, this is old, that is new. No, but I think we need we need to evolve in a time that allows us to evolve with nature, and allows us to adapt to the changes that are happening. Because if we push our own evolution really quickly, like what is happening now, we are creating a catastrophe. I think we are not ready for all this kind of, big industrial agriculture and all this big machinery and whatnot. We should stick in the lane of our evolution and practice and adopt those practices that are very contextual to us, that help us really adapt and build our own resilience in terms of food, in terms of nutrition, and in terms of the climate system. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Can I also add?
Yeah, go. And I know you guys are running away from, we're not talking revolution, evolution, whatever it is. We are building something that's bigger than ourselves. So yeah, go Chifundo.
Yeah. And as Juliet was speaking, I kept on thinking, it's this copy and paste mentality, I think, that's gotten us into this mess, just because everyone went through this evolution. Like Juliet says, we have to go through the same path. We don't necessarily have to go through the same path. We have to create what works for us, So just because some Asian country went through this, we copy their way of agriculture, we copy their way of life. But that's not us. Those are not our traditions. That is not our seed. that is not our culture, you know. Let us evolve at our own pace, like Juliet is saying, and not just take this copy and paste kind of answer or kind of system that we want to do. So that won't work for us. Let's create our own solutions based on our own problems.
That's wonderful. And I think culturally, as Africans, I know these are 3 countries here talking, we are all based on abundance mindset, generosity, and creating opportunities for others, which is Ubuntu. And what the new has done, because of all the adverse effects that then happen, it has really totally created the opposite of who we are, including loss of confidence in our own soils, our own food systems, our own wisdom, which we've carried for centuries, for generations. I like your intergenerational approaches as well. And I think the shooting down of the systems that we had put in place for our communities to sustain and remain what they were in their times of civilizations, and we've been seeing them crashing one at a time, is all the wisdom that was contained locally. And, you know, working with communities myself, I still see lots of excitement, except this time when you sort of use, and you guys are going to have an opportunity each to share, when you sort of use like maybe a mythical statement that we used to have as a way of conserving what we had then, which is not like the conservation that we have now. For example, there's an animal called an eland, and you know, here our people were hunting and gathering on foot, running after animals, right? And so in the game animals, there will be an animal that is known to be nice because it's got good fat and everything. And they know that warriors are ready to kill that animal every day. They put in a little twist to it. So there's an animal called an eland, which is a beautiful antelope. And so the myth goes, if you eat an eland meat and you say, it doesn't taste good, you know, like if you detest it, you will grow a goiter. So now the problem is, do I eat it or not? Will I like it or not? Because if I don't like it, even if I don't say it out, the fact that I've said it in my heart is going to affect me and I'll be seen by this thing. And there's a tiny twist of wisdom, but that preserved a very sensitive animal. One, it's very sensitive to the ecology that it's growing into. And when you eat the meat of eland, you're eating it with a very sacred and respect. So I think we have lots of those in our communities. So I just wanted to give way to saying, what sort of cultures have brought back acceptance on the work that you guys are doing? What sort of cultures can you track to say, the fact that these people have this trace in their background, they relate to this work, even if there's pressure from outside, including policy that doesn't question all the new programs that are introduced in our communities. So you can just share those, the traces that you've seen.
Yeah, okay, I will go first. I think there's a lot of damage really that our history reflects when you go back and see how much wisdom that we have lost. Because we are now seeing a lot of, I can give an example in Rufunsa. We had, ever since I started work with CTDT in 2012, in the other districts that I worked in, I never heard of any traditional ceremony. And you know, there are very different kinds, but maybe I'll share about this particular one in Rufunsa. It's called Shiwela Kumushe traditional ceremony, and this was not held for a very, very long time. I think we started doing work in the community. I never heard of it because everything else, all the knowledge was lost. I think the interest by people was not really there. But over time now that it's very comforting to speak about all these tradition and rites that happen in the communities. We started seeing a lot of these traditional ceremonies coming back. I think last year we participated in one and they really recognized the work that we're doing, because our culture really and our ceremonies, our rites and rituals are just so well connected, to those practices. Because without the seed, without the knowledge, without the wisdom that is in the seed and its involvement in those traditional ceremonies, there can never be any traditional ceremony. No matter what kind of hybrid seed you ever have, those will never take place without the wisdom of our indigenous seed. I remember one time I went to Chirundu and, Juliet is so excited, happy with the farmers. I want to talk about traditional rain-making ceremonies, and when we started, people were like, so you want to talk about that? It looked like it was strange that you could talk about these things. But those things are well connected to how nature is preserved and how people can sustainably use, the resources that are within their communities. And because over time this knowledge has been lost, we're seeing that there's been a lot of destruction in terms of the agroecological systems that these communities exist in. So yeah, I think it's the Chuelamushi traditional ceremony, which comes with a lot of rites and rituals and all those things that like the story that you spoke about the eland. Because it's also telling us to share, telling us not to do certain things, because when you do such a thing, then you end up with such a bad results. So there's so much knowledge that actually protects nature and is in harmony with nature that we have tend to, to put aside.
Thanks, Juliet. And yes, there's a lot of those where some of the very easy ways of life have been called old-fashioned and everything. But in the end, the basis is the connectivity to it all. Yeah, so thank you so much for sharing, Chifundo. We are almost getting to the close of our session.
Yeah, I won't take too much time with this question. When we work, we have a session called Stories of Ourselves. And this is a very beautiful session where we sit down with the old and the young, and they talk about the history of a place. If it's a school, they talk about, there used to be this here. There used to be this here. When I was younger, I used to, like the older people who talk about how they used to go hunting and how they used to go forage for fruit in the forest. And those sessions always almost bring me to tears, because the children cannot picture what was there before. And I've seen friendships form during those sessions, because the older people always get nostalgic and they always talk about, there's this saying about the good old days, and how when people talk about the old days, they always really revere the old days and talk about how beautiful it was and the kinds of fruit that they used to eat when they used to go out either hunting or heading the cattle or these kinds of things. And now those trees are not found anymore. Those fruits are not found anymore. And so when we have these sessions, the young ones are always very interested. And they always want to see this revival, because the stories are so beautiful when the older people tell them. And in some communities, actually, not just one, we find that these two generations always seem to come together after those stories. And it's always beautiful to witness. And the young people now always want to learn more. So I still believe that through such stories, we can be able to revive and have the old stories come back.
I think we should really tell our stories. We
Yeah.
should really, really tell our stories. I worry for my children who might never know anything apart from the knowledge that I pass on to them. I think this is very important that we keep the wisdom going.
That's amazing. Guys, this sounds like such a beautiful place to wind down. The power of telling our story. I really like that. And like, because also, even if you spoke to someone of our generation who is not working in our field as such, you guys sound amazing. Your wisdom, the humility that you share these stories with, the connectivity that I sense of how you're connected to the people that you work with. You're definitely one with these people. And there is no separation, because even in a degree paper, an education paper, permaculture, regeneration, holistic management, all these designs, the frameworks are making us identify more with our people. We are the people to carry the flags of our countries, of our work to the bigger world stage. So I'm totally humbled to have been chatting with you guys today. So maybe as a way of closing, you have an option to do like two things: to share how people can, support this AE work in a way or another, like your wisdom, or to share something that totally humbled you to a place of growth. When you work with communities, you think you know something, and then you face a situation that will cause you to grow and completely change your life in that moment. So it's two things: a story, or how can people support agroecology wherever they are.
Oh, that's a tough ask. I'll talk about what humbles me in this work, I think, because I get truly humbled each day. When you work with communities, you realize you do not know anything. You think you have all this book knowledge, and then when you get there, you realize, oh, I totally do not know anything. And so maybe my last words would be to honor all the wisdoms, like Juliet was saying. Let's honor all the wisdoms. Just because we're book smart does not make us totally world smart, and we don't know what these communities are going through every day. We have not walked a mile in their shoes, and it's important to be moderators and to listen and to let them guide us through the process and to learn as we work with them, because we really cannot envision half of what they're going through. Those are my last words.
Thank you, Chi. Juliet?
Maybe I can speak to two of the aspects of the question, if I'm allowed to, Precious. For me, I think people should support this very important work, because we are not doing it for ourselves. We are not ultimately doing it only for the communities that we work with, but we're doing it for the entire world. We are maybe only the people that have been sent to be whether the way makers or the messengers of this good cause that we are championing. So there's need, if people want to support the work, they can get in contact with your organization, Precious, which is Regeneration International. They can create, creating the strong networks and the linkages. I think they can get in touch with Chifundo's organization or my organization here in Zambia. We need, because the people that we are working against, or the other system that is on the ground is really strong, because they've got the financial capacity and they can change. All we have right now is our love for the world, our warm hearts that we're giving, and our lives that we're laying down. So if people can come in, those who've got, the financial capacity, they can support these organizations that are doing amazing work. You can't imagine how many women's lives have been empowered, how many women's lives have been changed, how many children are not going to school hungry because they've had a meal from the school feeding program, because their parents have been engaged in a seed systems training and they understand how to save their seed and conserve their seed, or they have enough empowered to work with the soil and produce their food in a good and sustainable way. I think if you can, please get involved in any way that you can. But what really humbles me every day in my work is to see how resilient women can be. And I think for me, every time I go to the communities and I'm in the communities, I'm in the midst of the women, I am just so humbled. I am just so charged, to want to continue to do this work that we're doing. And Chifundo has already said the learning, the co-creation of knowledge, the passage, the wisdom that we get from the community can never be measured. Whether it's never written, it's never known, it's always passed on, but you can never measure it. And colleagues, we women are holding the other half of the sky.
Oh my God, you guys are amazing. On behalf of Regeneration International and our partners, thank you. Thank you for the work that you do for the cause of seed, food, and landscapes in our continent. Amidst all the tough oppositions, some that you know of and some that you don't, and some that is yet to come, your mindset of the possibilities that this work has keeps you guys running. And I'm so proud to really be part of this thing that is happening in this world, and for our names to be recorded as people who ever walked in this small part of the world. Our little corner work is also going to echo everywhere else. And so as the world and as Team Humanity, we're really privileged that you two exist. Thank you, and may you continue going strong and emerging stronger, and the scars you carry are part of the victory. And as soldiers, one day is one day, as we say in Southern Africa, we will win. Thank you so much, ladies. I really appreciate.
Thank you so much for having us, and I hope we can meet soon.
We should.
Yeah.
We should.
Thank you, Precious. Thank you, Juliet.
Thank you.
It was lovely sharing this space with you.
Thank you so much.
I feel so energized after this discussion.
Thank you. Okay, hi everyone again. I am here with Ntando. She's my home girl from Zimbabwe here. She's a mother. So as you are aware that the People's Food Summit for 2023, the African theme is to really bring all the connections from household to the continental level, including the cultural, social, and economic dynamics that are involved in the story of food and seed sovereignty. So I have an absolute privilege to bring you a wonderful woman who is connecting with us with her very limited internet. So we're also keeping our fingers crossed that this recording will go well. As we will glean from her wisdom, she has raised two amazing children, and she lives with her husband on a plot, a farmland where she is every day interacting with soil and growing food. She has a story of a woman who grew up in Matabeleland South in the area of Gwanda. Her and her husband grew up in the same area. So they knew that one way or another, their journey of life will lead them back to the land. But she has an incredible story as an activist, as a mother who has turned around how her family treats and eats food, and many other stories. I'll just definitely leave us over to Ntando to share her story and, for us to just enjoy the person that she is. Ntando?
Oh, thank you so much, Precious. Greetings to you all in this amazing journey of living our dream to contribute not only in the production, but also in the enjoyment and the sharing of stories, our stories about food. So as Precious has rightly said, I'm Ntando, and I'm in my 50s now, and I'm grateful for having had the possibility to live the first 20 years of my life in the rural setting. And I look back now and feel grateful that I had amazing women around me. My mother, who was so devoted to parenting that she decided not to pursue her career in the medical field, but opted to be a full-time mother. For me, more mother than housewife, because she dedicated her life to the 7 of us. And also my grandmother. And these amazing women sharing a space and sharing land and deciding to produce almost 90% of our family's food from those pieces of land that they had. So today, I look back to those first 20 years, and then I add the almost 30 years now that I've been a mother as well. And I see the blending of different aspects of life. And the bottom line for me is realizing that it matters what you eat. It matters what you eat. It's not so much about somebody's story, but it gives you identity. It gives you pride. It gives you assurance that what you feed yourself and what you feed your family is something that you can vouch for. So this is, in summary, my passion about food sovereignty. I decide what I need to grow because I have already made a decision on what my family needs to survive and to thrive. And in ending, I mean, it's a long story, but let me just highlight my first experience with food issues as a young mother. I remember very well, some 25 years ago, when I tried to feed my child. My beautiful girl at the time was barely 6 months. And I had to make that tough decision because in Zimbabwe, maternity leave is just 3 months. So after 3 months, you have to go back to work and the child has to start on supplemental feeding. And she literally refused to feed on formula milk. So what could I do? I went for the conventional options, and the advice was there. Try this and try that and try that. I could afford it, but she literally refused. Until that day, I remember that day when I subconsciously fed her with the meal porridge. Actually, it was sorghum porridge that I was eating. I subconsciously passed on the spoon to her. And wow, she just loved it. And from that day, I decided that I will have to try traditional foods. Why traditional foods? Because it was the normal food for me. And as a young mother, with all what the world had taught me and I had seen, I was in that disillusion to think that foreign is better. Foreign is better. Why am I saying that? Because I thought if I went for the flavored yogurt or I went for this processed stuff or that processed stuff, I would be measuring up to what the society expected of me at the time. But no. And 25 years down the line, I am a food activist, and I am saying to every mother that I interact with, please don't complicate life. Feed your child on the most basic of the food you can lay your hands on, prepare it well, and if you can, grow the food. Thanks, Precious. I'll stop there now.
Okay, your story is incredible. More than just incredible, like I could just cry from hearing how your baby girl Nobubele refused all the purities and all the foods on the shelves, which, by the way, you said you could actually afford. And I think that's every mother's narrative in the moment. And of course, I'll talk using the African continent because that's where we are, and that's the beauty of this the People's Food Summit that we do as Regeneration International. We tend and we get to hear stories as each region considers important and relevant. And I'm sure, Ntando, in your days and in mine, I'm a fairly new mom. Fairly. The girl is now grown and she's responding back big time. So I think the pressure is there. It is in the open, and it takes really a special set of tools and understanding and being in the movement, wanting to walk the fidelity walk of agroecology, regeneration, permaculture, and just cultural awareness of how we've evolved with our own food. So maybe the question is, of course, Nobu chose to just want that food, but like, what was the reaction of your colleagues around you when you were giving her sorghum porridge? And the reason why I love your story is because my daughter didn't really refuse anything, but I also grew up rural, and stepping into the city, the foods that I ate obviously changed my life for negative mostly. And so I knew that I didn't want her to go through what I went through. So she eats sour sorghum porridge. So I'm so happy to be with a mom here. But I also want to know what your other colleagues thought of in those times when the new industrious food had just come in and it was the in thing.
Very good question, Precious. There was pressure. before I talk about my friends, let me talk about my family. At the time, my husband understood because he also shared the food that I ate. But he wasn't sure. He was concerned whether our beautiful girl would be able to process the food. I mean, as young parents, you want the best for your children. And then my extended family, some members thought I was a bit weird. I remember one sister saying, now your education is making you really mad. They thought, I mean, I was reading it from somewhere. But for me, at the time, it was partly out of necessity. And when I first shared that with my colleagues, at the time I was teaching at the local university. So when I first shared that with my colleagues, one of them literally stepped back to say, really? What's wrong with you? Did you try this and that and that and that? So the list will be extended of the other options that other children should of what other foods I could try on my child. So yes, there was pressure, there was resistance, there was disbelief, and then there were, to a certain extent, a lot of other hypotheses in terms of the possible side effects that my child would suffer because of the food. But thank God I had the women in the family, the strong women in the family. My mom just laughed it off. Say, of course, that's what you ate. And my grandma confirmed that. My aunt confirmed that. And my aunt was actually at the time practicing as a nurse. So she stepped up and said, okay, that's bold of you. That's what we tell young women in the clinic, at the local clinic, but they don't believe it. So yeah, interesting question. A lot of resistance at the time, but thanks to COVID, today, women are more appreciative of that option than they were in 1998.
So incredible. And, it sounds like you had a nice trail of strong women who raised you that way. So tell me about of course, you're teaching at a university, your travels around the world, and you coming back again to settle on the farmland, and why that was important.
Thank you. It's a very complex story. I was fortunate to travel from a tender age. I think my first trip was when I was 21. My first trip to Europe. It's a long story, but it was just a blessing, and it was an opportunity to see the world from those eyes. Imagine from rural Rwanda, from the village, to Frankfurt Airport at 21 and traveling alone. So it was like just mind blogging. That's the word, right? So when I then finished my first degree, I was fortunate to get a teaching assistantship position, and that came with the possibility to study abroad for my master's. So it was just a blessing after a blessing. And that year abroad helped me to get an appreciation of the options there are in the world. And being on a fully sponsored scholarship, I could afford to sample the different options. But you know what? After 3 months, I just felt homesick. And what I missed the most was the food. And being in an international class, I had colleagues from Asia, from Europe, from different parts of Africa as well. And one of the highlights were our shared meals. So I then realized that whatever I could get and identify with Africa was appreciated as well. So maybe that reinforced my confidence in the food that we have in Africa. And since then, I've traveled around the world. I appreciate the diversity in foods. and cultures around food that there are in the world. But I remain proud and extremely grateful for the package that we have, even from rural Gwanda in Zimbabwe. Thank you.
That's amazing. And I think that those were some of your first remarks that you said earlier, to say food really is our identity. And so when someone says, I miss home, part of it is they miss the food that they grew up with, the food that they evolved with. And you would be surprised to see that your daughter identified with that food because that was what was in her DNA, literally from her father and her mother. You see?
Yes.
That's really amazing. And so, okay, so you are looking at a new generation type of moms. What do you think is one of the biggest challenges that one would face if they were to take the path as yours? What do you think are some of the big challenges now that deter healthy, local, and nutritious food at household level?
Thank you for that question. To some extent, the same challenges that I faced back then, 1980s, 1990s, around peer pressure are still very critical. I'm not sure whether the hypothesis to the fact that it's part of the development cycle is true. Somebody argues that when you come from a disadvantaged background, you get to a point where you feel you want to lead a sophisticated life, and that comes with the new food cultures. But unfortunately, it comes with a lot of junk food. I mean, exotic food is good, but it has to be wholesome, exotic food. But in most of our cases, because of affordability, we substitute that with junk food. So there is still a lot of pressure to say, if you are in a public place and you are still feeding your child with local wholesome food, you lose a face. So yeah. And then the other thing I think is I don't want to say is lack of land. A lot of people have a possibility to access land in Zimbabwe to grow their food, but it's the lack of orientation on the value of growing our own food, and also on the value of buying our food from the local markets, which we have in abundance. So people always think that what is already packed and processed, yes, is convenient, but they always think that it's relatively sophisticated. The other challenge increasingly is, in my view, is too little knowledge about other communities' food cultures. So if I come from the southern part of Zimbabwe and I interact with somebody from the northern part of Zimbabwe and I share a meal without fully understanding how to prepare the meal, and then attempt to use the same ingredients to prepare the dish, I may end up thinking that that food is all tasteless or whatever. So we are not investing enough time. We don't have vested interest in learning about each other's food and food cultures and growing the food, and therefore we are losing out. But I'm happy that the movement is growing. The narrative is changing. Last week in Harare, there was the food fair. I mean, this past weekend, the seed and the food fair. So the narrative is changing, and this is coming with increased confidence to initiate a conversation like you are doing, to initiate a conversation about our food and our food cultures around the world.
So beautiful, Ntando, and so nice that you
Thank
mentioned
you.
the Seed and Good Food Festival. Some community members that I work with actually went. So 8 people joined the rest of the country in celebrating our foods. And what I love about the networks like Pelham that have brought people together they're bringing in also like the skilled class 1 well-known celebrity chefs to work with our traditional foods, to make them into salads, to add, tomato and onion to bambara nuts, to say, hey, you can eat this as a salad, you can eat this as a snack, like to use the current words, current words of food culture, but still eating your wholesome food. The second point that I would love to really appreciate is the fact that exotic foods are not altogether bad. But I think our understanding of exotic foods has been skewed by the affordability of junk food. And when you go there to their countries, you find that there's people who still value wholesome foods that don't eat what people here eat. So it's I think the pressure of status, I don't even know where that thing came from. To say, if your daughter doesn't know burger at this age, what are you doing as a mom? But eternally grateful for mothers like you who have gotten even into activism. And probably, everything would have to start at household level to then become communal and then become national and become a global movement. So you are one of the moms that are at the very foundation of this work. And maybe because you're always on your farm every day, you feel like, oh, okay, like I'm doing my own thing. But like those of us that have heard and leaned into your story, you're like, oh my goodness, she's done it. She's made it in this life, because she went to see the bigger part of the world and she still came back home and said, this life is what I am. So what can a mom do to even start? Because there are two feelings that one can have: feeling guilty and feeling hopeless. To say, I'm already late, but like, what can a mom do? New mom or mom in the process of momming, what can they do?
Interesting. It's interesting how you put it across. Just before I answer your question, just to say that I'm grateful that at 25 and then 21, our children, together with their cousins that we usually have around, they still enjoy the traditional wholesome food as their choice food. So we always tease them to say, when they go to the flats and when they go to the bigger cities, how they manage. We'll always come back for the ingredients, but we are not going to do farming. So it hopefully would stick with them. But what can a mother do to get started? I think we have to be intentional. It starts with each mother being intentional about wholesome food. For me, I think it's not so much about what food, but whatever food one chooses, it has to be wholesome food. Around us today, at the plot, we have planted a number of fruit trees. So one can just decide that I'll feed my child with the locally procured bananas instead of bananas from the supermarket that have traveled from across the country or from across the region. That's a deliberate choice. So our buying patterns would, with time, lead us closer and closer to local procurement and wholesome food. The second point, I think, is to be open to learning. Networks like the food fairs, they can be started, they can be initiated at any level, whether it is at a church or in a community, or it's young mothers clubs. You just bring your mixed beans salad and you introduce others. So just being intentional in networking around wholesome eating would be great. And the last point I want to highlight as part of the value chain is to try and grow something. I mean, even if one is living in a flat, one can grow herbs, for instance, on a windowsill. My experience is that when I started growing the first few plants around me, it gave me excitement, confidence, and a desire to grow more. So we started with just a few crops, and now we are growing, I would say at least 75 to 80% of our food comes from our plot. Of course, we are not pressing oil yet. We are not growing rice. We are not getting our own salt somewhere. But in terms of all our other grains, our vegetables, and our fruits, we joke up with the kids to say we should have a fruit that we can harvest from our plot each season. And so hopefully we are positively influencing them as potentially future parents as well. So passing on the baton stick.
That's so beautiful. What I heard is start where you are. If you're in an apartment, grow some herb and put it on the window. And for you to be this super mom, like a star for all of us to look at and admire, you also started small. So I guess humble beginnings and embracing the journey and be building confidence. This is really too amazing. And I think as we're coming to a wrap of our work and talk here today, I wanted to check in with you, Ntando. How do you think would be the strategy for getting households, mothers, because moms are the ones who deal with matters of food every day. How do you see it, this thing that you've started, how do you see it progressing into something that will grow into a bigger wave beyond just Ntando, Precious, Juliet, Chifundo, a few women that we know, Gertrude? How do you see it going beyond just the few mothers?
Thank you, Precious, for that question. I've grappled with that question as well. I remember one time I was invited to share a word of encouragement in a women's meeting. And subconsciously, I grabbed a handful of seeds with me. And I took the seeds with me, bean seeds. I don't know whether you know this. Sometimes it's called the 7-year bean. It's like a butter bean, but it's a perennial bean. It would grow for 7 years. So I took that to help me illustrate a point. And subconsciously, then I said to the women, please, each of you just pick the one seed. I mean, because I ended my presentation, so I encouraged each one of them to pick a seed and take it home and grow it. And you know what? Maybe there were 15, 20 women. At least the 4 of them grew the beans and they're harvesting. So I think, again, being intentional about sharing the message, but also finding easy and innovative ways to start the conversation. Sometimes people at face value appear very sophisticated and uninterested in agriculture or anything to do with getting dirty. But if we find creative ways to initiate the discussion, it helps. But for me, I'll say thanks to COVID, Precious. COVID and the lockdown pushed most of us to the wall. And when we hit the wall, we realized that, one, we had no food or no place to buy the food from. And secondly, we had no money to buy with. So we had to look around us and to look inside us. So a lot of gardens came out because of COVID. And I know a number of friends who were changed for good. And they've started. So what am I saying? Let's also use the crisis that we face in Zimbabwe. We talk about the economic crisis, but it's a good opportunity for us to turn that crisis to food sovereignty, to help ourselves and our children to be less dependent on the external environment. And I've always said in ending that if we can grow most of our foods, even with limited income, we're in a better position than to meet the other needs, because we can't afford a situation where food still takes more than a quarter of our income. Where will we get money to build houses? Where will we get money for education? So the crisis, the multiple crises that we've gone through as a people, not only in Zimbabwe, but globally. I know the movement is also growing globally because of the COVID crisis and the wars. And we have heard people saying Africa or Zimbabweans have been more resilient. And where is that resilience coming from? The resilience is coming from the ability to produce and to produce on food, and when you can't produce, to buy locally and reduce the cost. Thank you, Precious.
That's a beautiful summation of what is and where we should look. And yes, we have power to turn all the crisis and the uncertainty into action that will bring us to a place like Ntando. Ntando, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your story. And I just figured out this story needed to be heard. And I know we have little network issues, but we got to see your face. So that was also a beautiful blessing. We're also thankful for the technological space and all our support from Regeneration International for us to record this today. So thank you, my friend. And here's to more years of sharing wealth and health. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jazz. It was such a privilege and a blessing to share this space. I wish you all the best. Bye.